I'm trying to reach level 60 on Classic Hardcore as an Arcane only mage, and last time we delved deep into Scarlet Monastery and Razorfen Downs to pick up some upgrades. While we were slightly successful in doing so, in reality we actually got quite unlucky, and therefore we're still stuck with our level 18 staff. And seemingly to taunt me, this next quest awards us with the most horrendous staff I've ever seen. But before we get too into things, I've taken notice of an item that will change the game forever. Engineering so far has been extremely useful, saving our lives on numerous occasions. But lately, I've not seen much reason to level it. The gear upgrades are all but past us, the target dummies don't really change in usefulness the higher you go, but this was about to change. The Gnomish Netomatic is a trinket that when used, nets the enemy target for 10 seconds, which is actually insane for us. We currently have no viable crowd control to use in combat as an arcane only mage. Polymorph breaks on hit and heals the enemy to full. Grenades also break on hit and only last a second or 3, but this net, it gives us 10 seconds of free DPS before the enemy can reach us. And even if I don't use it for DPS, it's amazing to kite, to run away and bandage up, or to evocation. It's also our first trinket, a currently vacant slot that we would fill. Of course this item can backfire and root us instead, but this is actually not a problem at all. Blink instantly breaks the root, and even if we don't have that, gnomes can use Escape Artist, a 0.5 second cast that just breaks all roots. All in all, the upsides are massive and the downside is easily negated by our abilities. It's a must-have item for us. Now for the tricky part, actually getting it. To craft this item, we need to have learned Gnomish Engineering. To do this, I first had to level my NG up a bit and then do a quest to show off my work. This quest isn't all that easy though. I need 6 mithril tubes, which is easy enough, 1 tube just costs 3 mithril bars. Then I need 2 advanced target dummies. This is where it already starts being a bit complicated. While the engineering items needed to craft the dummy are easy to obtain and I mostly have them all from just leveling the skill, we once again run into our old friend, the leather. But as before, we know exactly how to counter this issue. So I just grabbed my fishing rod and proceeded to Dustswallow Marsh, where I found some debris, and after a few minutes of fishing, I had all I needed for the target dummies. Then finally, to complete the quest, we need an accurate scope. This item is not trained from a trainer, so I had to travel to Booty Bay to visit a specific vendor in hopes that he had the schematic, which he did. Now this is where we are blessed by a complete stroke of luck. Last episode I talked about how we needed a jade for the wand quest, but ultimately it didn't matter because we got dropped an extra jade. Well, as it turns out, the accurate scope requires a singular jade to craft, meaning that the extra drop was actually massive. With the items we needed, all I had to do was turn in the quest to become an esteemed gnomish engineer. Now, to actually craft the trinket, I just need some more general engineering materials as well as 2 types of spider silk. This didn't prove to be much of an issue though, since some lower level spiders in Dustswallow Marsh provided both of them. And after a lot of time running around the world in search of materials, we finally had our trinket, and it was time to test it out. Okay, time to use the gnomish Netomatic for the first time, so let's see if it backfires on me. It did, but I also rooted him, so... You might think this trinket a bit niche, but I am soon returning to Stranglethorn Vale to face off against the most dangerous elites the game has to offer. A single misstep will spell my demise, so every tool at my disposal is of huge help. It's time to prove that while we are basically a third of a real mage, we're definitely not bitches. But before that, last time I mentioned that the upcoming levels would require us to grind a lot. And to offset this, we would be delving deep into dungeons, and as such, it was now time for Uldaman. Coming into Uldaman, I did not expect much. The loot tables are kinda horrible for casters, and the quest rewards themselves do not grant anything crazy. But this dungeon must still be done because it features something like 10 quests for Alliance, and therefore is basically a whole level if we complete it. It was not long before we killed the first boss and something useful actually dropped. This pair of pants isn't amazing, they do nothing for our stamina or intellect, but do give us a lot of spirit, which is again marginally useful. To my surprise, I actually won it. As I said, coming into this I didn't expect much loot, but to be fair, it was better than I thought. I won a cloak as well, giving me some extra stamina and spirit, and the last boss can drop a ring with completely random stats, but for us it rolled the actual best combination possible, stamina and intellect. But I lost the roll, so sucks to suck I guess. At one point we went back to do the necklace quest before realizing that you need 5 silver bars to continue it, and the funny thing is, even though I'm 200 mining skill, I actually had 0 silver in my bank, which is quite unfortunate. But with the dungeon finished, I now actually had to be quite fast for the upcoming portion. There is a continued questline after Uldaman that brings me back and forth a bit, eventually leading back into the dungeon. So I wanted to see if I could make it back in before respawns. Standing in my way was a quick but dangerous elite quest. It brings me down into the basement of a dwarf fortress, which is a very scary place to be. In this place, my escape route is very limited, and the elite itself is an elemental, meaning it has spell-based odd attacks, so my mana shield will not prevent the damage. Of course, this would be a great place to try out my new trinket, but in my rush and stress, I completely forgot about it. But I managed to kill it anyways. Then, when I made it back into the dungeon, it had sadly reset, and I had to leave without continuing the questline. Next up is Zul'Farrak, although this will be harder than it seems. Official hardcore is very close, which means finding people who are not saved and in the correct level range for a dungeon is very difficult. Speaking of official, on release I will be doing a live stream that doesn't end until I hit level 60 or die. So if you want something to watch, make sure to stop by this channel. In the meantime, I spent some hours running circles on these pirates, killing so many that I might as well be going for insane in the membrane. Doing this also reminds me that I'm really just a budget frost mage. But it's still very good XP nonetheless, and being stuck here for a few bars isn't the end of the world. But like, still, where the hell are the drops? The drop chance for a pirate's footlocker is 8%, and I've killed well over 60 pirates without a drop, which is a 0.76% chance of going this dry. But of course, after bitching, I got the drop immediately and hightailed it out of there. Then I actually ran past the guy who tanked my Razor friend downs, and apparently he had run a Zul'Farrak earlier that day and managed to grab Zul'Thras. Now to get that weapon, you need to acquire 2% drops in one run of the dungeon. So that's a little bit insane to say the least. After a while of questing, it was time to completely humiliate this poor ogre with the Netomatic, as he just stood there, unable to move, while facing his demise. Subscribe. It is becoming increasingly difficult to AoE farm. As enemies approach my level, I can at most pull 2 at a time unless I have some terrain to kite around. If I want to try my hand at 3 or 4, I have to use Arcane Power. And this is considering I even got a new rank of Arcane Explosions but a few levels ago. But this fact hadn't really stuck with me yet. So during my time in Searing Gorge, I was chugging potions left and right due to overpulling. Where it really came to bite me in the ass was on a pull of spiders, while my potion was on cooldown. I popped down an emergency dummy, so it worked out in the end, but it's still scarily close. With all of this in mind, it might actually be time to retire AoE pulls. Yes, leveling will be somewhat slower, but I'm now in the final stretch, and killing mobs a slight bit faster is not worth dying over. I was also about to find myself a Zul'Farrak group, but apparently the healer died literally as I asked to join the group. Just my luck. Remember when I said it was time to retire AoE pulls? I lied. But yes, of course, as long as the terrain allows for it, we can always try. After a lot of running about, we hit level 50, which means we officially have 10 levels to go until we are done with the goal of hitting 60. And to reward us for a milestone level, all we get is a new rank of water, which is actually kind of big, don't get me wrong. Less time drinking means faster killing and faster levels. And to my extreme surprise, we actually got a drop that we can use from a random mob in Angoro. While agility is dead, the rest of the stats more than make up for it. We are now approaching a zone that I have dreaded ever since starting this challenge, Blasted Lands. Not only is it our first major introduction to late game classic WoW quest design, where we're gonna have to spend hours running around killing mobs for items with incredibly low drop rates, on top of most enemies having a shared spawn. But then there's also this guy. Terramus patrols the zone and the areas we'll be spending our time in. A skull level elite dragon which if pulled will wipe us from the face of this planet in seconds. On top of this, he's also learned to teleport. After an intense quest turn-in session, it was time to go back to Stranglethorn for perhaps the last time. We were now back on the 3 ships, not to blatantly miss the parchment, but instead to kill the captains. And this time it was a different story. What? Bow of Searing arrows? You're telling me I can't find a usable weapons for 30 levels, but I can find a bow of Searing arrows? Anyways. This time in Stranglethorn was unlike the others. All we have left are a series of incredibly difficult elite quests that are heavily recommended to do in a group. Of course we don't have a group, so we're gonna have to make do. First up, a quest that spawned waves of gorillas, ultimately ending in a wave of 6 gorillas plus the mob we have to kill. First wave was simple, just burst them down. Second wave came a bit quick, but with my mana gem I managed to clear it. This is where the problem started. As soon as the second wave was down, the third appeared and completely blocked my path, but I managed to flee up the mountainside and drink a little bit. The gorillas went on to attack the witch doctor inside, and I followed to burst down the named mob, as that's all I needed. They all quickly turned towards me though, which is fine. All I had to do was finish off the big guy and get out. But my blink got caught on terrain, and now I'm stuck with no target dummy nor blink to escape. Luckily, these gorillas are quite a few levels below me, and with a potion I managed to sustain their damage as I made my escape. Next on our itinerary was a sea giant. This one would prove to be the easiest elite since you can kite him to the Booty Bay guards, and with the use of our net, this proved to be quite simple. All I had to keep in mind was making sure he didn't reset by constantly dealing some damage. This is where it starts going into very deadly territory. Mokrush is a giant with 9,000 health, which is situated on the island with the big statue outside Booty Bay. While it is possible to kite him back to town, this time the entire distance is covered in water, which means it's not as simple as just running with him. On top of this, his melee attacks hit for 500 each. That means in a mere 5 hits, I am dead. Yet feeling hopeful with our new net trinket, I wanted to give it a try. I pulled with the wand and made sure to blink as often as possible. Keeping mana shield up constantly is crucial because it reduces each melee hit by 390, although only up until my mana runs out. Eventually I threw the net, but even with that it wasn't enough to give me the distance required to make it all the way to Booty Bay, so I had to reset. Defeated, I considered just giving up, but then it hit me. For a really long time now, I've been keeping a singular use of a particular item on hand in case of emergency. That item being some magic dust. Dropped from the dust devils in Westfall, this item puts any enemy to sleep instantly for 30 seconds. In general, this item is pretty crazy, but since it breaks on damage, I haven't had an amazing use for it yet. Until now. Considering how close I was to Booty Bay before I had to bail, this item could give me the extra distance needed to reach it. So, I once again jumped into the ocean to try it. After a few resets due to unfortunate happenings, I finally got one that seemed decent. I did the same as usual, pull with wand, use blink as often as possible, and when it was time to net, it actually backfired. As I've stated, not too big of a deal. Just use escape artist and swim away. This backfire version of the net actually lasts longer than normal, so I managed to get a few extra hits in. Eventually I got very close to Booty Bay, but the giant had caught up, so it was time for the magic dust, which worked out perfectly. I managed to make it to the guards, who subsequently aggroed onto the giant, rooting him in place. Now for the second part. I need to deal more damage to this giant than any of the guards individually, so I popped arcane power and started blasting, and eventually I managed to get the kill and my quest item, which apparently gave a very disappointing amount of XP. Well, at least this gave me enough confidence to try the next elite quest, King Mokla. I quickly went and got a new magic dust, then returned. This absolutely massive gorilla has even more HP, hits for the same amount plus some extra due to abilities, and has a stun. In theory, this should be easier though. The length of water I have to cover is substantially shorter, and he's a beast, which means he can be polymorphed at any point for me to gain some distance. One problem though, apparently he can't swim. As soon as I hit the water, he started evading. After some more time spent trying to get him to swim, I gave up and went to see if I could kill him the traditional way, by kiting around the tree. This could probably work, but I didn't find a good enough tree, so I decided to reset him. But when I went back to his spawn, I found a horde hunter killing him, so I helped out. Which really was a great idea, because the hunter actually stuck around for the respawn and helped me kill the king, using his pet as a tank. Great reminder to make love, not Warcraft guys. Come on. I also managed to pick up some insane plate boots from a chest, once again reminding me that while I can find amazing loot, it's never for myself. If this was official, I would be rich. It's not, so I have nothing. But with those absolute monstrosities out of the way, it was time to bid a final farewell to Stranglethorn Vale, the best zone in the game. After 2 days of searching, I finally managed to scrounge together a group for Zul'Farrak. Sadly, it was a triple cloth group, but having another mage is always to our benefit, which you shall see very soon. In this dungeon, there are some pieces here and there we could use, but we are mainly looking to secure a piece of loot from Ra, as he drops a very useful pair of gloves as well as a staff. Even if we do not manage to secure a weapon though, we will still acquire one from the quest Tiara of the Deep, so we're not super stressed. We started off strong by getting a very decent BOE bracer drop, which I actually managed to win, securing ourselves a bit of an intellect upgrade. But then it was time to show why double mage is such a force to be reckoned with, as the poor warriors could only watch in despair as we absolutely destroyed the meters. Sumra dropped the gloves, which I proceeded to lose, and then was off to the stair fight, which proved to be no issue. Really, the whole dungeon went by very smoothly, and the bosses died steadily one by one until we were nearing completion. The only thing remaining was to kill the quest mob for the tiara and secure our new weapon upgrade to finally say goodbye to our loyal staff. They didn't share the tiara quest. I didn't pick up the tiara quest. I can't do the tiara quest. I am stuck with this godforsaken staff from 30 levels ago. No! We didn't even get to finish the troll temper quest. With Zul'Farrak done, I was finished. No longer will I stand for this level 18 weapon being on my back. It was time for plan B, or like plan T at this point, I don't know. A while back, after completing Scarlet Monastery, I decided to pick up the one-handed sword as a reward. In case I couldn't find the staff, I would use this as a backup if I got an offhand. I have received neither staff nor offhand, so it was time to go on a quest. In Ironforge, I picked up a mission that sent me abroad to the other continent, into the zone of Ashara. Here, I simply had to traverse the extreme terrain, dodge hordes of Naga to draw some pictures of massive runestones throughout the ruins of an ancient highboard civilization. Then I was to navigate through elite giants, massive cliffs, and even higher level Nagas to the southeasternmost point of the entire zone, where on a small island there is a makeshift helipad that I will proceed to send a signal flare from, where after some time, a dwarf will fly in to pick up my package. To be fair, this is actually the first time I've been here in WoW. I had no idea this small island existed, and I guess that counts for something, you know? After returning to Ironforge, we turned in the quest to receive our 12 intellect offhand, and at the same time reach level 52, unlocking a new rank of mana shield and conjure food. Combined with the sword from Scarlet Monastery, we have now finally upgraded our weapon slot, gaining a bit of stamina and intellect. We are now entering the endgame. With only 8 levels left and official hardcore on the horizon, this server will die, and I will no longer be able to find groups for dungeons or other activities. This means the next time you see the Arcane Mage will be when I hit 60 or I die. See you on the launch stream.